people who would have died were this food not flown in nightly to several Biafran airstrips carved from the jungle. While the relief flights have reduced dramatically the number of children and adults starving to death, down perhaps to 600 a week from the high of several thousand a week last year, the dying continues. In clinics like this all over Biafra, youngsters in the final stages of severe malnutrition still die, as did several of these during our week in Biafra. Not enough food is being flown in, not enough grown, and for many, what there is now just too late. This bush clinic is run by Father Kevin Downey. After 14 years in Africa, he and fellow missionaries were ordered to leave Biafra in 1967 by the Irish ambassador. They stayed, as did Protestants of other nationalities, and they, in the main, have been responsible for keeping Biafra from starving to death. How hard has the war been on the Igbo civilian population? How many people have died, would you think, Father?
I would think that we've gone into the 2nd million. I am not a statistician, and it's very hard to talk about millions, but I think that it's, according to the experts here, I think that they've gone into the 2nd million. And they have suffered incredibly. And this is the one big argument that I would put forward as one of the reasons why they want to survive on their own and they want to live on their own. They could not have suffered so long and so much without having a purpose.
To augment the relief airlift, Biafra has formed a 2nd army to work the land. It is planting wherever it can. Here in virgin territory, where no crop ever grew before, young men employed by relief agencies and the government are breaking ground to plant corn, rice, yams, melons, anything else that might grow. And this, like everything else here, is conducted with spirit, emotion, and beauty. It's clear that as long as this war goes on, the starvation will too. Any break in the relief airlift, I was told, any crop failure in the next few weeks, and graveyards like these that dot Biafra and contain the bodies of the young and innocently dead will multiply.
There is a bitter irony in this billboard which is seen all across Nigeria. For Nigerian babies have not been healthy babies. Even before the war, disease and malnutrition regularly killed 1 out of 3 children there. And Nigeria's leaders ask, where was the world's solicitude, where was the church's succor before Biafra? General Gowon, a Christian, is sensitive to the charges of mass starvation.
I have got nothing to hide. My conscience is clear. I've got moral standard. God knows that we have no intention whatsoever to starve any Biafran children or to commit genocide against anybody. This war was forced on us, and it has got to be fought for the sake of the country, for the sake of the millions of people in this country.
But those millions of Nigerians are not thinking mostly of the war. Their chief preoccupation is commerce. And war or not, business booms. The Lagos docks are choked with ships from around the world bringing goods for the huge consumer market here and taking away for sale overseas Nigeria's palm oil and peanuts, its animal hides and cocoa, and its tin. But the real prize in Nigeria, the overriding reason the major powers focus on this country's conflict, is Nigerian oil. Already, they are the 12th largest producer in the world. Conceivably, they will eventually become 5th or 6th. The British produce most of it, a United States company, Gulf, the rest. It is Nigerian oil, much of it under territory that Biafra claims, that is said to trigger France's last-ditch aid to Biafra. It is oil that Nigeria is counting on to finance the reconstruction when the war is done. At the time of Nigeria's independence from Great Britain 9 years ago, oil profits netted about $7 million annually to the federal government. This year, in spite of the war, the Nigerian government will collect almost $300 million in revenue.
Biafrans admit it is an oil war, at least in part. They know their country sits above what may be the richest oil reservoir in the world. And it is the oil, plus the ingenuity of the Igbo, that has kept Biafra running. In refineries, backyard stills like this, small, crude, hidden away in the bush, Biafra produces gasoline, kerosene, diesel fuel in surprising amounts. There are 50 to 100 of these refineries all over Biafra, and they now produce enough fuel to keep the army, the church relief operation, the government, and the civilian population on necessary wheels. There is traffic on the roads, and on occasion it is heavy, which surprised me. Troops and food moving. No shortage of transport of any kind. And that is part of the staggering normalcy with which life in Biafra goes on. In spite of 2 years of war, in spite of the loss of all its major cities, in spite of the death of more than 1 million people in 24 months, life in Biafra goes on. Markets like this one at Orlu, where 40 died last year, were bombed and strafed by Nigerian jets. But the markets were moved back into the bush, and daily commerce goes on. Food is still on sale, but in smaller quantities than in pre-war days. Basic services are still being sold for Biafran pounds. Wartime inflation has forced prices up. Clothing costs have tripled. Cigarettes sell for $20 a pack. Inflation aside, life in Biafra is so normal that even the judicial system has not faltered. Back in the bush, a civil trial to settle a land dispute. Hardly the thing we thought we'd find in a supposedly defeated country about to be overrun. And in areas just recaptured as the Biafran army pushes south again, in cities like Owerri, where damage was heavy, after obviously heavy fighting, the business of cleaning up and putting things right started almost as soon as the area was secure. Owerri, after being in Nigerian hands for 7 months, is expected to be a fully functioning city in a matter of weeks, making room for refugees who already are starting to return, and for whom the first Mass of Thanksgiving in the unfinished and war-damaged cathedral was an event of paramount importance.
They had to suffer first of all from the air with the bombing and the strafing that left so many of our civilians dead. They had to fight at the front where so many of our young men have died. We have become, most of us, refugees. We have lost our property. We have nothing of our own. That suffering we have known for the past 20 months. That suffering we still have. But we live in hope that that Holy Spirit will come down on us, that he will enlighten the minds of our leaders, and that they will lead us to a true and just and lasting peace.
In the territory the Biafrans evacuated as they fled before the federal troops, the abandoned buildings echo only to the wind. And the cities in the Igbo heartland, once the most densely populated area in all of Africa, have been emptied of their people. Emptied by the Igbos' fear of the federal Nigerian. No matter the federal government's assurances that they will be safe, the Igbos flee. They have gone into the bush, leaving their homes shattered by shell fire. Their schools barren of students. their government headquarters in the once flourishing administrative capital of Enugu ghostly quiet. Nothing is left here now but a few scattered refugee camps and the federal troops who garrison the eerie and deserted miles of road and bush. At Abakaliki, a district administrator stayed behind. His mother and father are with the Biafrans, but he and his wife, Igbos, cast their lot with the federal Nigerians. A divinity student, he told me that the Igbo, the Biafran, feels it appropriate that he be likened to the Jew.
If we are to be likened to the Jews as we like to be, it means we are a chosen people. We are the people with the grace of God in Nigeria. Sorry, this is not being proud or selfish. Now, if we lose the trend, which is making others realize the goodness in surrendering ourselves to God and in living according to God's law, which is love, it is then that we fail. And this is what happened. With our drive and our punch and our talents, we tended to put what we should have put first last, which is God. And we put material things, money, houses, positions, human esteem, we put them first and put God last. And this is why the punishment has come, as it has come in the history of the Jews. Each time they failed and forgot their God, they were punished by a war on them, as we are being punished now by a war on us.
Nowhere was the war's punishment more devastating than in the commercial city of Onitsha. In this comfortable and sophisticated town perched on the east bank of the Niger River, thousands of Igbo merchants built their fortunes by hard work. The Igbo is a commercial man, and this market at Onitsha, the biggest market in all West Africa, was a monument to his enterprise. When the British author Elspeth Huxley came here, she wrote, "Anything can be bought in this market, from an elephant to an admiral's uniform. There is no difficulty about nylons or about raw meat, whiskey, gold earrings, avocado pears, Irish turkeys, penicillin, or anything else." When the Biafrans left here, they burned the market. What the Igbos failed to burn, the federal Nigerians took care of. Not a building in Onitsha is unscarred. The federal troops inherited just a skeleton, a ghost town. And in the city plaza lies the fallen statue of Nnamdi Azikiwe, Nigeria's first and only president, himself an Igbo. He now lives in London. This bridge across the Niger River was the link. It was also a dividing line between the Igbo East and the rest of Nigeria. The Biafrans, the Igbos, blew it up to keep it from serving federal Nigeria. The bridge can be repaired. But what about the bitterness between the Igbo and his countrymen?
Reconciliation and reunification seem at the moment impossible. At least that's the feeling we got in Biafra. The people simply believe that if they surrender or lose, they'll be killed. Biafra's leaders told me their rock-bottom condition for peace is a referendum in the disputed areas to be guaranteed by some third party. But many observers feel that Biafra would come to the peace table without that referendum if she felt her military position were better and the safety of her people guaranteed.
I came away from Nigeria convinced the genocide is not on the mind of her leaders or her people. They know they need the talents of the Igbo and they want them back. They fear an independent Biafra on their flank as a potentially hostile state with expansionist yearnings. And it must be said, there is growing impatience among Nigerians now at the slow pace of the war, and one would expect that pace to pick up in coming months. They've been stung by the recent air raids of Biafra's miniature Swedish volunteer air force, and they'll make an all-out effort, General Gowan told me, to take out the Biafran airstrips from which those planes fly and into which supplies and weapons for Biafra are flown each night.
To end this war soon, we conclude it will take a genuine effort by the major powers, perhaps by the United Nations. It will be up to the countries now supplying both sides with arms to stop. It will be up to someone to guarantee the safety of the Igbo after a truce and as the negotiations begin.
The United States conceivably could take the lead because this country has studiously avoided any military involvement in the war, aiding Biafra's relief airlift while backing Nigeria politically. But there seems little disposition on the part of the United States or the other major powers to step in. Their attention is focused elsewhere.